Hi, it's Kim Allen, and welcome to the next episode of reLeading, where you will have an opportunity to learn how to pause and pivot and proceed with purpose. Because when you do that, you become more effective. So I'm actually really, really happy for this episode because I have returning guests, Greg Kaiser Sr. and Jeff Sigel. My only regret is that you all weren't privy to the 15 minutes prior to this podcast because I promise you it would have been stand-up comedy gold. Uh, Greg and Jeff, I actually took a lot of notes here because I want to say it right. I know them really well, but I want you all to get to know them really well. They always have something relevant to say, and they are continuous in their effort to change lives and organizations for the better. So that being said, I just want to give you some information about both of them regarding their bios. They're similar with their advanced degrees, master's degrees, University of Penn, Harvard. They're steeped in C-suite executive leadership positions. They own their own consulting companies, which I'm going to give them an opportunity to tell you what's new with that. And they're recently published authors. So I want to welcome Greg Kaiser Sr., who is the author of Management Rescue.
Thank you,
and
Kim.
the founder of Management Mastery. So welcome to Jeff. Jeff, is that Greg Kaiser Sr. or Greg Kaiser Sir?
I always called him Sir.
Yeah, so we're going to address him now as the royal sir that he is.
No, there's a junior out there, Kim.
Oh, okay. All right. So welcome to Greg and also to Jeff Sigel, who is the author of, I want to make sure that I'm holding this up correctly, The Middle Manners. He is the principal consultant and coach of Twinning Edge, which is his organization with his twin brother, Eric Sigel. I want to give him a shout out. He's amazing. So I'm saying welcome to both of you, and I'm saying yes to both of you with both of your books. I am a learned woman just from listening to your conversations, but more so from reading about your books.
Well,
Right.
we have both of our books, but I have both of your books to see if I can get this into the center there. So
Thank you so much, Jeff. I will send you the check later. Okay. All right. So first of all, to both of you, happy Friday, right?
Happy Friday. Thank you.
And it's a better Friday when I'm spending it with my Greg and my Jeff. Okay. So we have a lot to talk about. Both have a lot to talk about. But we have to have a little fun with the audience because the audience knows a little bit about both of you, but I want them to know a little bit more about you. So we're going to talk about both of you as a human being, and then we're going to talk about your books. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. So we know that you are both authors and owners of your successful individual and collective company. So my first question, I have two questions for both of you before we get into this. So it doesn't matter who answers first, okay? What is the weirdest talent that you have?
Ooh.
Kim, I knew you were going to do something like this.
Of course.
What is the weirdest talent? It's not a weird talent. I was a flute player for like 20 years.
I'm sorry?
A flute player. I played the flute.
Flute player. Okay.
That's not a weird talent. I mean, that's just there are lots of flute players out there. I'll have to think about weird. I don't know. Greg, I just bought you some time, so I'm hoping you.
I appreciate that. You didn't buy me just enough time, Jeff. Can you filibuster a little more?
Well, I will filibuster a little bit more. It's interesting. Before I wrote The Middle Matters, I actually wrote 2 novels that I have never published, and they are science fiction novels. And Greg, you would probably appreciate the first one. It was like 220,000 words long.
Oh.
Yeah, and then I sort of read, oh, that's too long for a book. And it was a science fiction novel, but it had all these references. It had biblical references. It had references to the writings of Jorge Luis Borges, because I studied Spanish literature at some point. It referenced Zoroastrianism. I mean, it was all over the place. It's a crazy novel. I don't know if it may not be salvageable to ever be published, but
come on, Jeff, it's you and C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis also wrote really long science fiction books.
It was funny because my brother, when I wrote it, he was like, I feel like you've just written your version of the Foundation series, Isaac Asimov and so forth. So and by the way, it does cover like history from like the beginning of time to the end of time. So it's quite it's a space epic, if you will. So
wow. Okay.
That's a weird talent. Anyway, your turn.
that is a weird talent. That's an untoppable sort of.
So you asked me to stall, and then you got that. So now you have to one up me.
Okay, this is possibly appropriate to some of the things we're going to get to. So, and we've all talked about this before, but I like to teach.
Mm-hmm.
And my experience with teaching was either doing training in the corporate world or I taught university level for a couple of years. Well, that's a different audience. So for the last several years, I've been teaching religious education, also known as Sunday school.
Sure.
If you can picture this.
Yeah.
To middle school kids. And the weird talent, which God bless my wife, Kathleen, coached me on, is I am now able to relate to 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. And she said, go back and channel the 7th grade Greg. I'm like, oh, this is going to be complete chaos, but it has seemed to make a difference, which, 30 plus years of corporate training does not prepare you for that.
Yeah.
So it does speak to a certain Gumby-like mental flexibility.
It's funny you say that though, Greg, because I think you may know this. I actually, before I was a marketer, I was a high school math and physics teacher. And I always say that was the toughest marketing job that I ever had, right? But it is the same thing, right? You have to understand, that you have to understand your audience and what are their challenges and make it interesting to them. And for me, it was, like teaching physics. Like I would teach my students, I had a group of students at one point who were like just not good at, they were put in this class because they weren't good at math. And so I would teach them.
I would have been in your class, Jeff.
I find that hard to believe. But anyway, no, these are great kids, but I would teach them things like, hey, here, like the stuff we taught in physics was like, here's how the forces and the vectors and all this stuff. But in this other class, I would teach them like, here's how a toilet works, or I lived in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. We were 5 miles away from the Limerick nuclear power plant. So we had the whole unit on here's the nuclear power, and how it works. Or I did a unit on nuclear weapons and how those works. And I showed them The Day After. And this was like, do y'all remember that movie, The Day After?
Oh, absolutely.
I showed it to them, and this was probably 20 years after The Day After had even come out or something, and they were like, this is the dumbest movie ever. And I had to explain to them, like, we all thought this was like, like a documentary of what was coming in the next couple of years. Like, it was frightening, so anyway. But absolutely, like getting into their mindset, understanding, and getting them excited and involved. So I've been teaching myself recently, and my wife, who's back in school, was like, "You have to do the icebreakers, or they just won't talk for the rest of the class." And it's like, wow, that is weird. I never understood like what's your favorite candy. Whatever, I just thought it was some goofy thing you do, but it actually is really valuable. So.
I did this at the college level when I was teaching at college, and it. Let me think of the correct. It angered the students. There's another expression I was thinking of, but I won't use. 15% of their grade was class participation, and it was a business strategy course.
Yeah.
And I said, and they're like, "Well, that's not fair. Like, if I don't get a good grade in that, I won't get an A."
Right.
I'm like, well, this is a 400 level course, pretty hard course. You're probably not getting an A anyway. So
so just go ahead and talk. Absolutely.
Well,
they got better at it.
Yeah, but I love that. I mean, I don't know if that's a weird talent, Greg, but I think that's awesome that you're.
Yeah, I didn't know that, Greg.
Tapping into your inner 7th grader is awesome.
Good guidance. Sometimes you need good guidance. Kim, we always get good guidance from you.
Oh, that's great. So do you want to hear my weird talent? Actually, I think I should have taken
I want to hear your weird talent.
Well, you know what? It's basically what don't people know about you, or what wouldn't they know about you? But I used to be a dance instructor, and I never took dance in my life. And I was Arthur Murray Dance Studio. And my expertise was ballroom dancing and Latin dancing, and I never took those lessons ever. So that and $1 will not get me a cup of coffee ever.
I actually want to understand a little bit about this, and I was hoping you were going to say like flaming baton throwing, but I like the fact that you. So,
You know, people assume those things about me.
how can you be a ballroom dancing instructor if you don't know how to do it, or did you just knew how to do it?
I was instinctive. I don't know. Anyway, so that's really great. So now the audience knows so much more than they have to know about us. So let me move on to the second question. Okay. So again, either one of you can start with this. What is something that's changed for you since you were a guest on this podcast that we should know about? What is something that's changed for you since you were a guest on this podcast that we should know about? What's new?
So I'll go on this one.
Okay.
So, and Kim, I think you and I have spoken about this, or maybe not. I can't remember who I talked to. Kathleen and I are putting together this series of online training courses for management. Mm-hmm. And we have the first course in the can.
Wow.
Which, you say, okay, this is 120 minutes that you have to videotape, and it's split up into 20 lessons, right? Like, well, that doesn't sound very hard. I mean, hell, I can talk for 2 hours. No, it is ridiculously hard.
I bet. And
to go back and listen to yourself. Mm-hmm. I recorded the one lesson, which is only about 6 minutes, probably 15 times.
Wow.
And so then Kathleen comes in and she's like, I have this app called Descript. And it's the thing you were describing pre-show, Jeff, that you and your brother are doing.
Yeah.
Like, I have this app called Descript, and I can go in and edit that video to take out you saying,
Well, you know what, Greg? I'll actually one up that is I have a tool that you could. It's not cheap, but it's not that expensive. Where you can actually put in a script. It wouldn't be of you a video. You'd have to put other things on the screen, but literally, it sounds like your voice, and you're not reading.
Yeah, the tools that are out there now are just incredible.
It's amazing.
Scary in some respects, but incredible.
Yeah.
The script has some version of that. I think Canva does too. Kathleen has that.
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable using those yet. We've been playing around with them a little bit, but I'm in early part of the learning curve on that.
Absolutely. Well, I'll use that as a segue into what's new for me is, so you mentioned, Kim, at the beginning that my brother and I have a company. We are literally just sort of signing the documents and so forth this week to incorporate. But our company was built around, we actually started looking at, how hard it is for people to, it's actually a management problem and a sales problem. It's really hard to get marketers or employees, sales folks to understand what it is that your vision of your company is. And so we've been building these tools that essentially, we could start with something like an interview or a podcast or whatever. We can take that podcast and we can break it up into clips and so forth. That's not that new. There's other things that can do that. We can also create other content from it. But the other thing we can do is we can use that as source material and essentially create a virtual version of the founder or a virtual version of a expert or whatever, and create this virtual expert, and then it answers questions. It can write articles and all that kind of stuff. So it is pretty crazy what's possible in the world these days.
That what both of you are talking about is so brilliant, especially for people like us who are authors and we're all self-published.
Yeah.
And this information, anyone listening to or watching this podcast should heed what Jeff and Greg are talking about. It's so important that you know what tools are out there that you can actually use. There's reasons why we all wrote our books, but unless we're telling the world that story, no one's going to know. And these are the ways that you can do this. So kudos to both of you. This is why I think that your combined IQs, I don't know, what is it, someone's rent? I don't know. It's like just ridiculously, you're both two of the smartest people that I think I've ever known. So I do have a question though, because it was part of the title of this, why 3 senior leaders wrote a book. So I'm only taking one step back because I want to continue where you were going, but if you could share with the audience, what was going on that you wrote your book? What was going on in your career? What weren't you seeing? What were you seeing? Did you identify a gap?
Yeah, so mind the gaps, right, Kim?
Yes.
So what was happening is, so I had a corporate career, all of us did. And then I went out on my own and started doing some consulting and coaching work. So Kathleen used to sit and listen to me talking to people, when I was working at home or at night, whatever. And she said, you answer the same questions over and over and over. It doesn't matter what engagement you're on. The same things keep coming up. I'm like, yeah, damn, I should pay attention to that and start writing it down.
Yeah.
Because the management, call them problems, whatever you want to call them, but these management challenges, let's be nice, are pretty much the same. And I'm a fairly voracious reader. The people have been writing about the same management topics for as long as I've been reading about this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, there's what's the marketing term, Jeff? White space or something? There's like an unmet need there, right?
Yes, unmet need, white space, pain points. Yes.
Yeah. See, I know I could count on you, Jeff. But that's what was really and this, I was working on this thing for 4 or 5 years while I was doing other consulting work. And as both of you know, sitting down and actually putting your fingers on the keyboard and cranking out, some number of words that turn into chapters and so on. That's a discipline. Yeah. But it was fun. Yeah, I learned from doing it. But that for me was sort of the burning motivations. Like, like everybody keeps asking the same questions. What if I could, in my own small way, help to answer some of these questions? People would find that useful. And fortunately they have.
Great.
So I'm gonna build, Greg, on that point and say, for me, it's a little bit of a different angle because I was focusing specifically on people in the middle level of leadership. But for me, actually the book idea actually came out of, I was kind of the go-to non-HR person at Cracker Barrel to talk to middle managers.
I can picture this.
Yeah. And I used to joke that with them, I'd be like, the only reason you asked me is because I'm like the one person that actually has one-on-ones with my people. But all kidding aside, so I noticed that there was, just this gap there where people and I think, and I talk to people about it all the time. This is the pain point that middle managers have. They get promoted because they are great at doing something. And all of a sudden, their job isn't doing something anymore. It's not just getting the task done. It's leading the people and influencing the organization, all that kind of stuff. And nobody trained them at all. And so I'm like, there's a huge gap here. And so I just wanted to create something that was a really, really practical view. And it's been really interesting as I've sort of moved into this consulting world, is the middle managers have a pain point, right? They feel like they don't know what they're doing. And their bosses have a pain point in that they feel like the middle managers don't know what they're doing. And the people that work for those middle managers also have a pain point that they don't feel like their boss, the middle manager, knows what they're doing. So everybody's pain point is all lined up of how do we help this person in the middle elevate and raise their capabilities, as opposed to what you hear a lot about in the news today is this, the unbossing, or we're going to get rid of our middle layers. And I'm sure both of you I feel like this is like, I don't know, it's like a 5-year cycle. It's like cicadas or something. I don't know, like focus. I don't know, where it's like, we're going to get rid of everybody in the middle, and the middle always grows back. It always does. And so to me, it's much more important that how do you build.
Yeah, it's a vital function in every company. So earlier in my career, I taught a course to newly promoted directors. And this is not board member directors. This is, you go manager, director, senior director. Yeah. And the course title was How to Be a Good Director. Mm-hmm. And it was exactly the stuff you're talking about. They get into these roles and they're a little unsure of themselves. Then their boss thinks they're an idiot, and the people that work for them think they're an idiot. A couple of simple things you can teach them that they end up looking, if not really smart, competent.
Right.
Which then makes them confident.
Right.
And it was the weirdest damn thing, because I forget what I was doing then, some quantitative analysis job or something. They came to me and they said, hey, you seem to get along well with your managers. Can you put something together to teach our new managers how to do this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah. Well, it would just be like what I currently do. Yeah, that'd be great. Okay. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're right, Greg. I mean, I think that a lot of the time, the things that people, it's just the things that they don't know. And then once they know them, they know them. This is not, some of this stuff is, it's not rocket science. It's not learning to play the flute, whatever it is, it's you have to really, really just know a couple of things, and then you are good. And I think a lot of the time we just skip them. And then you've got this self-perpetuating problem where if the manager doesn't know it, they don't transmit it to the people that work for them, and then they don't do it, and they keep managing the same way over and over again, which I believe is the definition of insanity. So.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely.
Can we take a question on you? And because I'd love to hear your take on your book or your books.
Me? Oh, so the very interesting thing that I actually wrote down based on what Greg said and based on what you said, Jeff, that Greg's beautiful bride, Kathleen, heard him speaking, realizing that he's repeating himself over and over again. Mm-hmm. And then Jeff is looking at this body, a large body of the belly of an organization that is dismissed, let go. And they grow back, and the belly keeps getting bigger. Yeah. Well, for me, it's a little bit different because I'm privy to the most confidential conversations, but I'm also privy to being in small and large groups, and I'm an observer of human nature. And one thing I've noticed that shocked me, especially at senior leader level, that they are not trained on everything. They're sent away to like a finishing school, or I mean, it's just unbelievable. But yet they all let me backtrack. They do not all. What I saw for well over a decade was the same thing. People don't know what they don't know, Jeff, because they were never shown how, or that part of their learning and development, especially as they catapult into higher level leadership positions, has never been taught.
Right.
And not everyone, I will tell you, is a small percentage of people in organizations that are lucky enough to have an executive coach, number one. And also because executive coaches come from all different backgrounds. So we're not all the same. Right. But I would go in, and the things that I would do to, I don't know if it was Jeff or Greg who said, at least to get them noticed, or Greg, you were saying it helps build their confidence. Yeah. For me, so I'm not speaking for other coaches, that what I was doing that I thought was basic were aha moments.
Yeah.
For people making an obscene amount of money. And I was like, wow. So toward what you both are saying, I just sat there. I don't even remember, especially my first book, I don't remember writing it, but I was head down for 1 year, 12 hours a day. And so the moral of the story is that I think it comes from within, it comes from your toes. And I think that's what happens with us, at least the three of us, where we're observing what's going on and what the not only the gaps are, but I will say that for the three of us, that we observe now the hairline fractures. Mm-hmm. Because the hairline fractures of an individual or within an organization become fault lines.
Yeah.
And right. And that's
Well,
how,
especially when they get the higher levels.
yes.
They
Yeah.
just,
Right.
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 Everything's getting amplified.
yeah.
And sort of percolates down into the rest of the organization. I mean,
Yep.
I don't know if this is true, but I'm going to guess that the number one cause of micromanagement is a micromanaging boss of the micromanager, right? I mean, right? It comes down from the top, right? If you're being micromanaged, you're going to micromanage. You have to. I think one of the things that I sort of come to realize, I don't know if you both had this experience, but after I wrote my book, I have learned things that from my own book that I guess I didn't even realize were in there.
Mhm.
All of these epiphanies. And so the other week so I think you both know, my book basically says, that the transition to a middle manager or an effective middle manager is to move from being a doer, somebody who just does tasks, to being a doer, leader, and influencer. I have multiple roles, one of which is to get my job done, but one of which is to get the most out of my team, and another is to get commitment from my organization. And it dawned on me the other day that all of the problems of the doer come from the fact that their entire focus is task oriented, right? They are result and task oriented,
Mhm.
And
and they
they're
are
good at it.
right. And so when you have a doer who is managing a team, what they try to do is do through others, because all they're trying to do is get the other people to basically do what, I'm basically saying to my direct report, do what I need you to do, right? So that I can get my work done, as opposed to, how do I help you learn, help you grow, help myself learn, help myself grow? How do I help people around me? And the reaction to that sometimes when I talk to people is, yeah, but results are all that really matters.
Right.
And my view is results come when you focus on the people,
Yep.
not when you focus on the task. Because if you just focus on the task, you're ultimately going to, it always ends up in firefighting and chaos. I don't know. That's what I think.
Well, so Jeff, let me jump off from that. So this training thing I'm working on talks about, it's about communications, business communication specifically. It's a very specialized form of communication. And there's a part in there about empowering employees, because this is a buzzword, right? This is a jargon thing. Oh, we want to empower our employees. So even though I wasn't smart enough to be in your math class, Jeff, I do understand the order of operations. So you can't be empowered until you've been given clear direction. And what made me think of it is when he's talked about micromanagers, because all of us probably worked with one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
They don't give super clear, long range direction.
Right.
Hey, we're going to go over there, and because we're paying you a decent amount of money, you're going to figure out how to get us there.
Yeah.
But here's some direction. These are the guardrails, all this stuff. And I've observed this too many times. People we want empowered employees, and then they don't let them do anything.
Right.
One of those two things are in inherent conflict.
Right.
Well,
and that's the thing that I see happen all the time is that people basically delegate and quote empower, and then they take it back, but they don't even realize they've taken it back, right?
exactly.
The moment you step in and correct something that you delegated, you have removed the delegation, right? It's done. You're not delegating anymore, because your team will just keep coming to, hey, the last time the boss told me that I was wrong,
And
so
then
now I'm gonna go ask them how to do it, and then the next week they're asking again, and they're asking again. That's why I said it always ends up in firefighting, because at some point the boss is does not have enough capacity to deal with all these questions and decisions and whatever that they're being forced to make by themselves. They don't realize that they are the cause of this, but they have made a situation where they have to be involved in all the decision making, and so the organization becomes limited by their capacity. And I like to say, it's not actually that the organization's work expands to fill their capacity. It actually is that the work expands slightly beyond their capacity. And that's why you end up with this kind of chaotic situation where there's all these decisions that need to be made, but the boss isn't available to make it. So it takes 2 weeks to make a decision that should have taken 2 minutes.
This was, from an observer standpoint, I was put on some task force, whatever the heck they called it, to work on dysfunction in a specific area of an organization. The biggest fight I ever saw in one of these conference rooms when we were talking about this was about what you just said, decision rights.
Right.
And there were expletives involved. This is, you can't tell me what I'm allowed to decide, so I don't know what to do.
Right.
And actually, the person at a relatively high level in this organization left the company over it.
Wow.
I'm like, that is tragic. This is potentially one of the more talented people there, but nobody would sit down and clearly delineate decision rights. Okay, Jeff, you're the brand manager for XYZ. Here's all the things you can do, and we're going to come back and give you some help with doing those things, but we're not going to tell you how to do them.
Exactly.
And it was just fascinating to observe, as the fly on the wall person.
Right.
So sorry when you were starting to talk. And Kim, I told you at the beginning, or actually before we got on, if I start talking over you, just interrupt me.
No. But I'm listening to both of you. And what I love about this is the core, the very bottom of that ice cream cone that you're both talking about. It's that people do not know how to engage.
Yep.
I promise you, that is what the core is. It is communication, but it's how they're engaging. You're actually telling people what's in my book.
Yeah.
So again, I just think the alignment is really interesting. So, all right. So I have a final.
When I steal stuff from your book, I will attribute it to you. Okay. And Jeff, I'll afford you the same courtesy because I've already stolen some of your stuff.
How about it? All right. So I wanted to ask you both this question. I have actually so many questions, but you've been answering a lot of the questions. But so toward this final question for both of you, because we know about you. This is your second time on this podcast. We know a little bit about you as a human. We know about your academic, your professional background. We understand what your companies are about. And we now know what you're both doing since you were guests on the podcast. So my question is, anyone listening, an organization, a senior leader, an influencer, an individual contributor, why should they partner with you? So I'll give you both the opportunity to answer that. Because of what Greg is doing with his online courses, because now, Jeff, you're going into this other company with your brother, plus you're teaching right now as a marketing professor at UMass. You're expanding yourselves. Why should anyone pick up the phone, pick up your book, pick up the phone, or write to you that they want to partner with you?
And I'll jump in and say, I think for me, the reason that you partner with me is because I am not somebody who says, hey, I'm not a guru. I'm not going to come in and say, I have all the answers that magically came from on high. I have learned everything that I learned in the trenches. And for me, that's the real value. And I find that when I talk to people, when I give courses and workshops and so forth, what people really appreciate is that I am telling stories about my own experience, not of being brilliant and always getting it right, but of getting it wrong, dusting myself off and saying, this is what I learned from it. There was a great John Dewey quote. I don't know if you all know John Dewey, the educator, but he said, you don't learn from making mistakes, you learn from reflecting on your mistakes. And I think that is, for me, that's what I think I bring to the table, is I've spent a lot of time reflecting on what did I learn from all of the things that I have done right, but even more importantly, the things that I've done wrong. And so I have all the experience that I have, but I also have learned along the way, and I was paying attention to what I was learning, and that's how I was able to write a book about it and so forth. So I'll pass it over to Greg, but that's my.
Okay.
Yeah. So the one thing, this goes back, you get, what's a buddy of mine used to say, you are now what you were then, but it just gets more sophisticated. So going back a million years, I was running a department. We put together this thing called Foundations of Knowledge. Okay. When you come in, you have to learn this very specific skill set. How to do quantitative analysis. Then we're going to teach you how to plan. Then we're going to teach you how to execute. Then we're going to teach you how to do strategy. So build it. And what I'm doing with management mastery is that the phrase I like to use is you're going to learn processes that are, number one, repeatable. So they're going to work, but they're also scalable.
Mm.
So it grows as you grow as a manager. These things grow with you. So you have these fundamental dimensions of management. You got planning, you got people management, you got direction giving and continuous improvement. At the heart of that is communication. Well, if you get a basic skill package, it's not exclusive or exhaustive, but it's a basic skill package that you can then start building on. Because somebody said it before that you send people off to these leadership. What was the phrase? I forget who said it. You send people off to leadership training.
Right.
I had a very robust discussion. Some people might characterize it as an argument with somebody the other day, where they were talking about this surgical level of training. And I said, that's interesting. Have you trained them on this, and this before they get to that level?
Mm-hmm.
No. Well, they need to know all those things. And the example I give, it's if you're a soccer, football, and the rest of the world, you can't bend it by back like Beckham. He could do that hook shot from midfield.
Mm-hmm.
You know how to kick straight. He didn't get to be Beckham until he came all the way up through the ranks and he could kick straight.
Right.
And that seems to resonate with people. It's like if you're a golfer, you can't hit a fade shot until you can, hit a straight drive or whatever. That seems to resonate with people oh yeah, maybe it would be good to get my footing right before I start trying to learn the elements of sophisticated negotiation.
Mm.
Which, as you know, if you're in business, you probably went to a negotiating class.
Right.
Which, depending on the level you're at, is vitally important. It'd be helpful if you also knew how to communicate well before you took that course.
Right. Right.
It's simple stuff like that. This is somebody mentioned rocket science. This is not rocket science. This is simple stuff.
Right. Yeah. And people gloss over it. And I'm a firm believer that sometimes we have to slow down in order to go faster.
Yep.
I really do agree with that. So, okay. Well, I definitely have to do another podcast with the two of you, because in a very short period of time, you're going to be returning with even more information to share with everyone. And what I want to do is just make sure that those that are listening and watching with regard to Greg and Jeff's books, The Middle Matters and Management Rescue, this I will share with everyone, that you are in good hands with Jeff and with Greg, because they are powerhouses. These are, they're both a formidable force, and they have a lot of information that they are doing, that they're sharing now, that will change organizations. So of course, I wish you continued success. Toward the whole purpose of me having a reLeading podcast, because I cannot emphasize how important it is for all of us to pause. When you get your first job as a leader, your first day on the job as a leader, you should never have another day like that. We should always be pausing and looking around and keep growing, keep learning, even if after you do it on your own. We have to have our heads on a swivel. Yes, exactly. So that we can pivot and move forward in a different direction. So we should never stay on a straight and narrow road on our leadership journey. I can't stress that enough. I think that by doing that, when you do move forward, you're going to be doing it with purpose. And what happens is that with your new purpose, that you're going to start feeling things that other people are going to be seeing in you. And that's when you start to catapult yourself to the next level. So until next time, just remember, in your career journeys, you can be absolutely anything, but be effective. So until next time, go be effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Kim.